check, 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 check. Check, check, 1, 2, check, 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 check.
Welcome to one and all who've come here today for the Sri Doraiswamy Endowment lecture. Um, now we are getting straight into the program. We are not having a prayer and any further introductions. So now I request Mr. Padmanabhan to come and say a few words about the endowment.
Pranams to Sri Sadguru, pranams to Swami Sri Hari Prasad. Now, many of you may be knowing about Sri V. Doraiswamy, in whose name this endowment lecture has been created. Anyhow, for the purpose of record, I'll just say a few words. Sri V. Doraiswamy, 1931 to 1999, was a distinguished officer of the Indian Audit and Account Service. He was an alumnus of the prestigious St. Stephen's College, Delhi, and completed his master's in economics before joining the Audit and Account Service. He served with distinction in many roles and eventually retired as Additional Deputy Controller and Auditor General of India in 1989. His childhood was spent in different cities in the country, and his service years also took him to many more, leading to a deep understanding of states, languages, and cultures, which made him identify himself more as an Indian than belonging to any state or city. Sri V. Doraiswamy was extremely well-read and was known in family and official circles for his deep interest and encyclopedic knowledge in many areas, as diverse as music and military history. He had a keen sense of humor and would regale colleagues and friends with his original take on things around him. Through all this, shown a consistent devotion to Sri Sadguru Jnanananda Saraswati Ma, his guru, unshaken in spite of the difficult years when he patiently bore an incurable and terminal illness. His family members, his daughters and son have created an endowment. This was created last year in Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation, and the first endowment lecture was held in August 2024, and the lecture was delivered by Major General Rajiv Narayan, who spoke on the river Saraswati, and that talk was very well received. Now, this is the second such lecture, and we have Professor Indira Peterson from Mount Holyoke College, USA, who will be talking on Arjuna's penance and combat with Shiva. Thank you. Now, I think I hand over the mic to the MC for an introduction about the speaker.
Of exploring this wonderful event by Dr. Indira Peterson. Sorry. Dr. Indira Vishwanathan Peterson is a professor of Asian Studies Emerita at Mount Holyoke, USA. She held the David B. Truman Professorship at Mount Holyoke, as a professor of Sanskrit at the Columbia University, and 40th anniversary professor at the Five College Consortium of Western Massachusetts. She has a BA Honors in English Literature from Bombay University and MA and PhD in Sanskrit and Indian Studies from the Harvard. Professor Peterson specializes in Indian literature in Sanskrit and Tamil, Hinduism and South Indian cultural history and performing arts. She also works on European Indian culture, contact, and comparative literature. She has lectured and published widely in these fields. Her major publications include Poems to Shiva, The Hymns of Tamil Saints, a major study and translation of the Tevaram hymns of the Nayanmars, and 2 books on Bhairavi's Mahakavya Kirtarjunaya. These are design and rhetoric in a Sanskrit court epic. Story of the encounter of multiple Indian and European knowledge systems, arts and sciences in South India's premier cultural center in the 19th century under the leadership of the royal polymath Safroji II of Tanjavur. A central focus in this book is the history of Tanjavur Saraswati Mahal Library, a distinguished library of manuscripts in the fields of knowledge, Indian fields of knowledge in Sanskrit and other languages. She is also writing a book titled Drama, the Court and the Public in Early Modern India about Kuruvanji and other Tamil dramatic and musical genres in the 17th and 18th century. Indira Peterson has held a number of research fellowships, including fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the American Council of Learned Societies, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the American Institute of Indian Studies, the Social Science Research Council, the German government's Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation. She was honored with the 2022 New England Choice Award for Leadership in Art and Culture. Now I request Professor Indira to come and take the stage.
Nice of you. I will now launch into the lecture without much ado, as soon as I find my notes, which are here. Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver this second memorial lecture in honor of Shri V. Doraiswamy, who also happens to me to be my beloved uncle, my mother's brother. I offer this lecture on the Sanskrit poem Kiratarjuniyam of Bhairavi, which is translatable as Arjuna and the Hunter, as a tribute to Sri Doraiswamy's wide-ranging interests in literature, history, and culture, which they already mentioned in his biography. A celebrated 6th century classic of the prestigious court epic that is the Mahakavya genre, Arjuna and the Hunter is the first retelling of the episode of a familiar episode to most of us of Arjuna's tapas, translatable as penance, in the Mahabharata. In this narrative, the warrior hero Arjuna performs penance in the Himalayas. I think I can start. Can you start the PowerPoint, please? Yeah, you start, and then I will then introduce the poem. I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at it. That's right. So, in this narrative, the warrior Arjuna performs penance in the Himalayas in order to win the god Shiva's grace and obtain the boon of the divine Pashupata weapon to help the Pandavas defeat their enemies in Dharma Yuddha, just war. Appearing in the guise of a hunter, that's the word kirata here, and challenging Arjuna over the shooting of a wild boar, Shiva bestows the boon to the hero only after he has tested him in various kinds of combat. And that's the tapas and the combat. In addition to being Hindu sacred texts, as we know, the epics Ramayana and Mahabharata are ancient narratives that shall I get closer? I can get closer, but there's a plank here. Excuse me, we're setting up all these things. Is this better? Let me know if you can hear me, and I can also move this. Is the first retelling, in the epics are ancient narratives that every Indian child grows up with. Valmiki and Vyasa's Sanskrit itihasas have been followed by innumerable retellings in Indian and many world languages, while individual epic characters and episodes such as this one, Arjuna's tapas, have inspired and continue to inspire multiple interpretations in literature and the visual and the performing arts. And they've already mentioned my first book on Bharavi's poem, so let me do a little, I point over there, yeah. Is it working? I pressed. Excuse me, some tech questions here. Can you be closer to me and fix this, please? I need to move this and I don't know what I'm doing. Turn it on or something? Or you could stand here and maybe that might be from there? Okay, so do I say next? Is that what I say? Okay, yeah, sorry about the technology. Okay, so I actually, next please. Okay, here is the Kirata Arjuniyam with a commentary of Prakashavarsha, a very ancient commentator, not long after Bharavi's time. And I will say a little more about, Bharavi himself. Is Arjuna as the ideal hero, one who combines the qualities of a warrior, kshatriya, veera, and a yogi, a man of discipline, as well as a devotee, a bhakta, representing core values in India's classical civilization. That is, I'm arguing that the poet Bharavi, and I'll come to his time period in just a minute, was the first one to take the Mahabharata episode, which was well known as part of the epic, and interpret it according to these particular ideas and how they come together in a brilliant way. And that explains why Bharavi's poem has lasted so long and has been celebrated so much and has had tremendous impact and enduring impact on further interpretations of the episode. I give in this talk a summary of the argument contained in my translations. And I want to say something about why Bharavi's poem is different from other things. Sanskrit Mahakavyas, long poems, were written for a courtly audience of connoisseurs, rasika, learned men and women, especially kings and warriors and learned people. Bharavi's choice of a key Mahabharata episode for the very first time, as far as we know, highlighting Arjuna's feats of tapas and heroism, as well as his devotion to Shiva, would have had a special appeal for the poet's contemporary audience somewhere in the 6th or early 7th century. Historical evidence, including the Aihole temple inscription, next one please. Aihole temple inscription of 634, next one please, that is the Chalukya kingdom. I'm sorry, the previous one, if you don't mind. The Chalukya kingdom this is where the Aihole temple is. There is an inscription there where the poet Ravi Kirti, apparently a Jain, built a Jain temple, but he praised himself as a person, as a poet who had the skill and fame of two great poets. The two great poets, of course, the first one was, everyone knows him, Kalidasa. But the second one, a new poet whose name nobody had ever heard before this in an inscription, was Bharavi. And I'll quote the inscription. Savijayatam Ravi Kirtihi Kavita Shrita Kalidasa Bharavi Kirtihi. There's a pun there. Bharavi Kirtihi and Ravi Kirtihi. So he praises himself as, I'm as good as Kalidasa and I'm also as good as Bharavi. So read my poetry, please. So Bharavi was a famous poet by 634 AD or CE from the reign of the Chalukya king Pulakeshin II, about whom all of us know a lot. This suggests that Bharavi was a Shiva poet flourishing in South India during the era of the rise of the Pallavas, the Chalukyas, next slide please, and other warring rulers. Among them, the Pallavas in particular patronized the Tamil hymns of the Nayanmar Shiva poets. The first bhakti poems in India were composed and sung in temples, and they were composed by Appar, Sundaramurti Nayanar, and Sambandar. And the reason I'm mentioning this is that there are two episodes from the Mahabharata which have special significance in the Tevaram collection of the 900 plus hymns of these poets. And those are Bhagirathas bringing down the Ganga, and the other is Arjuna's tapas. So you see the contemporary scene is very interested in this story. The narrative of Arjuna's tapas, next slide please, oh no, this is good, became highly popular in South India from this period onwards. It's depicted in sculpture. Here is the Kailasanatha temple of Rajasimha Pallava. Next slide please. And this is where my cover image for my book comes from, where presumably, the previous one please then, yes, this one. So the combat between Arjuna and Shiva is being depicted here. And the next one please. And of course the very famous and rather controversial relief at Mamallapuram. And the Mamallapuram relief is often interpreted as the descent of the Ganga done by Bhagiratha. And surely the description of Arjuna doesn't quite match that relief. And yet there are many reasons which I won't go into, which suggest that since both of these episodes were important to local people, it is quite possible that both of them were meant, and certainly even today local people just call it Arjuna's tapas. So we don't need to argue with them. Next one, please. There he is. And the Ekapada tapas is described in Bharavi's poem in great detail. And I'll get into that. Next one, please. And then further, later and later, there are sculptural representations in Tanjavur. I don't have an image for that. Halebeedu, which is what this image is. And then let's see a few more, and I will, one more please, next please. Next please, and you don't know the story yet, so I'll be telling you about these things. Maybe we can go back a little and I can actually mention it. Previous one please. Okay, here you can see the boar hunt. On the one side is Shiva, on the other side is Arjuna. Next one please. And here you see a very interesting, the ending of the combat between Shiva and Arjuna. And there are multiple ways in which this is presented in Bharavi and in other poets and in images. In this one, in particular, please. Next slide, yes. And what are these people doing here? Who are these people? They are Bharavi's invention. This doesn't exist in the Mahabharata story. There, Arjuna goes and performs tapas in the Himalayas, and then he gets the Pashupata Astra, the weapon which will help him and the Pandavas win in their just war over the Kauravas. But here, you have these Apsaras dancers dancing. They have been sent by Indra to seduce and tempt the ascetic. This is Bharavi's invention, and why this is there is something I will comment on. Next one, please. And here is the overpowering from another local temple. Karnataka is full of these reliefs, and M.S. Nagaraja Rao, the archaeologist from Karnataka, has studied all the major temples. Next one, please. And even farther south, in Tirunelveli district, you have Arjuna and the Pandavas represented in major life-size sculptures, and here's one from Krishnapuram. Here's Arjuna. Next one, please. And then in Lepakshi, the very famous depiction in the murals in the Veerabhadra temple, here you see the Shiva sending the boar in order to attack Arjuna. And next one, please. And here's the boar attacking Arjuna, who's standing on one leg with his arms raised up like that. He's the tapasvi. But you notice that Arjuna is dressed as a Veera, not as an ascetic, and that becomes a very central point in Bharavi. Next one, please. The attack. Next one, please. And lastly, I want to mention the spread of this episode and its interpretation to Southeast Asia, particularly in Java. The very first Kavya poem written in East Java, an old Javanese poem, was the Kakawin, that was the word for Kavya, by Mpu Kanwa, who wrote about the king Airlanga, but he called it Arjuna Vivaha. And it shows the story of Arjuna when he goes to his father Indra, Indra Loka Gamana. But before that, the central piece is Arjuna's tapas and the winning of the Pashupata Astra. So this is not a depiction of that. This is just from Angkor Wat. This is one of the great Mahabharata reliefs which are all over these temples. Next one, please. And as you can see, this is the Mahabharata was fascinating for these people. Next one, please. And it was also then acted out in the Vayang shadow puppet tradition, where Arjuna is on the left and his enemies are fighting the Kauravas, and Pandavas are on the good and evil sides of the tree of life. Next, please. And there's Arjuna. I think that is a fantastic image. Next one, please. And lastly, I have a very charming album from the Aundh Museum near Pune, which is a 19th century, almost Mughal-style depiction of the epic, of the poem. And you see the wonderful large boar. Next one, please. And here is Arjuna receiving arrows from every direction. Shiva brings a whole army of Kirata hunters to fight against him, and single-handedly Arjuna is coping. Next one, please. And then finally, there is the end of all of these episodes is a wrestling match. Arjuna loses every single weapon. He had his weapons. He had his sword. He had his unquenchable, the arrows go into that, I forget what it's called, but in English, anyway. He loses everything, all his accessories and weapons. He's almost naked. And there's the sannyasi, and there is Shiva, who's like a wrestler, and he's wrestling him, and that is the climax, and you'll get to that in just a minute. Next one, please. And I guess my last image is from the Albert Museum, Jaipur. But this was built by Sawai Madho Singh in the late 19th century, the Jaipur king. And he loved Bharavi so much that there were only 4 wisdom verses, subhashitas, in Sanskrit and Hindi that he carved in this marble palace and museum. And next one, please. And one of them is Shuchi Bhushayati Shrutam Vapus Prashamastasya Bhavati Alankriya Prashamabharanam. I can't quite see it and I should know it. Sanayapadita Siddhi Bhushanaha. And I have the translation of that in just a minute, so we will see that. Next one, please. There it is. Prashamabharanam Parakramaha. I just didn't want to say the wrong word. Parakramaha. Pure knowledge adorns a man's body, acquired by the study of the sacred texts. A calm spirit is the ornament of learning. Decisive action adorns the calm spirit, prashama. Success achieved through policy based on right conduct is action's ornament. That last one, sanaya padita siddhi bhushanaha. That is, you have to counsel, you have to think, you have to act after much consideration and on the side of dharma and justice. And that is the meaning. So the reason I'm showing this to you right now is that the poem is not read like the Mahabharata, which can be read as a story, as a narrative. Here, you have to pause over every single verse through all of the verses, the 10,040 verses of the Kirata-Arjuniyam. Each one will take hours, days, many commentaries, many teachers to understand and to fit together in this larger episode. And the meanings of it become extremely complex. And that complexity is what made it proper only for an audience of connoisseurs. And so, in a way, that convention is being broken by the Murthy Classical Library, which gives you the text and the translation, and with an appropriate teacher, you will have access to this very ancient and epic, which was read only by very erudite people. And I hope that that will be a joy, something that you will, not just the story, but how does Bharavi do it, which is what I would like to speak about today. So let me continue then. I should also say, Padmavati, is it correct that the lecture is being given in printed form or not? Yes, if it's given in printed form, there will be some things that I will skip through and some things I will say, but you will have the written text to be able to refer to later on. So if anything is missing, don't worry about it, please. Okay, so Bharavi's poem both influenced all of the later interpretations and it stood completely apart from them, and I would like to show you how it does both. Bharavi transformed the Mahabharata's narrative, creating a dramatic and tightly crafted poem brimming with elevated ideas, which is what Kavya is supposed to do. He was famed above all for Artha Gauravam, that is, depth of thought. Upama Kalidasasya and Bharaver Artha Gauravam. He was the person who was deep in this thinking, in elegant verses. But more importantly, Mahakavyas, court epic poems, were required not only to portray courtly life and combat, which are the topics, and lovemaking, which are the topics that royal connoisseurs like, and Brahmin teachers and ministers teach wisdom verses. These are the main topics of Kavya. But he also had to illuminate noble ideals as well as all 4 goals, purusharthas, of human existence, particularly as they apply to the lives of Kshatriya kings and warriors. Dharma, law, cosmomoral order; artha, wealth and success and worldly life; kama, pleasure and everything that attaches to it, including family life; and lastly, moksha, liberation from karma samsara. At the same time, Mahakavyas were to evoke the experience of a major aesthetic flavor, or a rasa, aesthetic savor or emotion. The 2 major rasas that you were to experience or feel through this reading of a poem or hearing of a poem were because once again the courtly circles were Veera, the warrior's ethos, and Shringara, which then becomes, of course, the main rasa of Bharatanatyam dance and all. So these two aspects of courtly life become the central rasas. Now here, what place does Shringara have in a scenario where Arjuna is going and doing tapas? And so now you have the answer to why Bharavi inserted the apsarasas. He had to show some courtly scenes of dancers and, doing their thing. And there are many descriptions of lovemaking and drinking and all of that. But they have nothing to do with Arjuna, the ideal hero. In fact, these women are trying to tempt him, but he's firm and disciplined. He's a yogi, and he completely rejects all of their advances. This makes the hero even more exalted because it shows the strength, his dhriti, his firmness, his dhairya, the way he stands steadfast. So Veera, the heroic rasa, is the main rasa of the Kiratarjuniya. In undertaking the rigorous ascetic discipline of penance, tapas, followed by engaging in many forms of heroic combat, including a wrestling match with the god, Bharavi's Arjuna is shown to be a man of discipline as well as a great Kshatriya warrior. Shiva rewards him with his desired weapon, not just because of his tapas, this is key, but because of this combination of the warlike and steadfast virtues of a hero, along with the discipline of penance that he undertook. As befits the ideal man, when Shiva reveals his divine self, Arjuna bows to him as a devotee. As I said, in the 7th century, the beginning of the great bhakti poets and the temple worship of, and the hymns being sung in the temples, this was becoming very important. And Shiva was the central god in South India for all of this. So not only the Sanskrit poets, but the Nayanmar and others were celebrating the worship of Shiva through the devotee. And Arjuna, in this particular episode in the Mahabharata, shows himself as that great devotee of Shiva. Let's talk a little bit about why, as I say in my book itself, on Arjuna and the Hunter, why Arjuna became the ideal hero. You all have some idea of it already. First of all, the choice of the Hunter episode as the poem's theme enables Bharavi to plunge immediately and dramatically into it. In fact, Yudhishthira is sitting in the forest in the Aranyaka Parvan, and then at this point, a spy, which Bharavi invented, comes to him and says, the Suyodhana, that is Duryodhana, is ruling so well that he's fooling everyone into thinking that he is the dharmic king. So you Pandavas have to fight against this and make sure that the people aren't overtaken by adharma. And Vyasa himself comes and advises Yudhishthira. The brothers have a big council where they argue with each other as to whether we should fight. You know who will say we must fight right away? Bhima. Arjuna says, I will do whatever my dharma upholding Yudhishthira brother will say. And Yudhishthira says, let's think about what is right and wrong. And he goes on for a whole sarga, a canto about what is right and wrong. And then Vyasa says, decisive action. Now is the time for action. I, the Guru, tell you, and the action is to go and worship Shiva. The person to do it will have to be Arjuna, and he must go armed as a Veera, and at the same time he must perform tapas. He will look like a paradox, because normally ascetics wear only jata and ochre clothes, and here is armed yogi, the warrior yogi. This paradox is what Bharavi uses as his central image, as I will show in a few examples. And I can go on about this, but why is Arjuna the hero? The Arjuna is the hero because we already know that for a poem that shows this combination of devotion, action, and heroism, the perfect warrior must also be the perfect man of discipline, acting justly in the world, transcending sensual desire and self-interest. Arjuna's austerities, his tapas, render him fit for his encounter with Shiva. Without that, he cannot propitiate Shiva. He must be a yogi and tapasvi. And ultimately, and this is his preparation for disciplined action in the actual war against the Kauravas. Now, we know this lesson already from the very famous teaching of Krishna to Arjuna. in the Bhagavad Gita. Bharavi has that very much at the center of his intention and the back of his mind when he portrays this poem in this way. As the son of Indra, king of gods, among the 5 Pandava brothers, it is Arjuna who embodies the qualities of the exemplary warrior. Even without the tapas, he is the hero. But Arjuna is also an exemplary man and a devotee. He has a special relationship with Krishna, the incarnation of Vishnu, the preserver god. As you know from the Bhagavad Gita, he is chosen as the disciple, who aids the Pandavas in the cause of just war. Arjuna is also Nara, of the pair called Nara Narayana, man, the human partner of Vishnu's rites of tapas in a former age in the Badari Tapovana, the ascetic hermitage of Badari. And he's the inseparable friend of Krishna in the entire Mahabharata narrative. This is what makes him the perfect. So even though, as you said, nobody talks about the Shiva episode, Vishnu is very much here. The two are very much here. It is he who received Krishna's teaching. In Bharavi's poem, the climax of Arjuna's combat is neither a warrior's triumph over an enemy. Shiva is not an ordinary enemy, so Arjuna cannot defeat him. Nor is it a gesture of complete submission. In the Mahabharata, when at the same time, he's Bhakta, and at the end of my talk, I will show just how that is accomplished. That is the uniqueness of Bharavi's interpretation. Arjuna does not cave in or give up at any point, and he keeps Vyasa's advice and the instructions of the gods all till the very end, and it is that which makes him the Shiva pleased, and then give him the divine revelation, and then the Pashupata weapon. And the weapon itself is not for a selfish cause, for the destruction of the universe, which is what the Pashupata can do. It is for the destruction of adharma in the universe through the I am an old and very knowledgeable guru, and I can give you moksha, liberation itself. Would anyone reject moksha if it is freely given to them? Mortal soul be affected by karma if I fight and Krishna says no, it won't, because you have the immortal, the soul is immortal. And then you have jnana yoga, you have karma yoga, the yoga of action, which you must perform according to your varna and ashrama, your class and your duty in life, and above all, according to your swadharma, your own dharma. If you cleave to your own dharma, there will be no karma, and you will not become deprived of the path to liberation. This is what Krishna explains to him. Here, Arjuna, in a beautiful speech, and there's also one other thing about this particular 11th sarga. Bharavi uses very complicated, beautiful meters, much longer than anything in the Bhagavad Gita. To even read one verse will take a long time. And I will read a couple so you can hear them. And each one is very, very appropriate, meaning if he's walking up the Himalayas, the rhythms are that of somebody marching up a mountain. Or when they are fighting, there's a meter called Dhruta Vilambita. And it's exactly as it sounds, Dhruta Vilambita, and I'll read that too. When he's fighting with Shiva, that's the meter that you get. But the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, and most Puranic texts are in the simple shloka meter that anyone can recite, 16 aksharas or syllables. And if you look at the half verse, or 8 syllables per quarter or pada. It's the commonest meter in Sanskrit, right? Bharavi suddenly plunges into that meter in the 11th sarga. I think he's deliberately pointing out that I am reminding you of the Gita teaching right here, and I'm doing it with the way in which I'm doing, telling you about it. So Indra has this speech where he accuses the warrior of selfish motivation, and Arjuna gives the proper answer and says, I will not be tempted with moksha. And I will read a few verses so you can hear Bharavi and how he says it. And the other thing Bharavi does is he describes Arjuna's tapas. I will read a few selections from that. The tapas is described in 3 or 4 stages, mainly 2 stages. In the first stage of asceticism or penance, Arjuna is one with the forces of nature. He, is compassionate and calm, and the animals are at peace, and there's beauty all around him up in the Himalayas. And the Himalaya thing comes up. I should give you one more narrative link here, which is that Indra, then pleased with his son, appears to him and says, I just wanted to see whether you had the strength of will and mind in order to continue with this quest. And the answer to the quest doesn't lie with me. That lies with the great god Shiva, who is the only person in the universe who can give you the Pashupata, which is what you need for the war. And Arjuna says, all right, so what should I do? and he says, propitiate Shiva with tapas. So when after the peaceful tapas, which the Indra's minions report to him, after the 11th sarga and the 12th sarga, Arjuna becomes a cosmic force. He is higher than the Himalayas and greater than fire and all these things. So he almost threatens the universe with his tapas. That is when Shiva appears as a hunter and sends the boar and so on. And they quarrel over the boar, and we don't need to get into all that. But so that description of tapas is completely different. So I'll read a little bit from each. And the last thing I will do is to, after 7 or 8 sargas in which different kinds of combat are shown, as you saw in the images, Arjuna is being pelted with arrows, he fights with his sword, he loses everything, stripped one thing after another, and it's beautifully described. The descriptions are fantastic. And then finally Shiva appears, and this is what's very interesting, as a wrestler. And when the two of them do the Malla Yuddha, which I think had special significance for Malla at the Mamallapuram also, the Malla Yuddha is beautifully described. It is extremely short. After 7 entire sargas of hundreds of stanzas, suddenly you have in the Dhruta Vilambita, the two wrestlers wrestling, and by the 18th verse, a beautiful thing happens. This is the climax. The beautiful thing is that wrestlers have a move called grasping the feet, and then they will throw the other person. In the Bhagavata Purana, such moves are described when he fights the Malla and Chanura. He throws them over his shoulder. So Arjuna catches hold of Shiva. As Shiva leaps up in the air, Arjuna also leaps up in the air and catches hold of Shiva's feet, his pada, charana. And immediately Shiva has no choice. If someone has grabbed his feet, he must give that devotee his grace. So he reveals himself immediately. Arjuna is completely astonished. He said, "Oh, please forgive me. I didn't know you were Shiva." And Shiva says, and you will hear what he says, but basically he says, "I'm so glad you didn't give in to me, because I would not have given you the weapon had you been a coward. So here you are, your Veera, and I'm very, very pleased with this." So this is a unique ending of Bharavi. And at the end, I'll say a couple of comments about the other people and how they ended the epic. So let me now read the translations little by little. So I've already told you what is going on. Now first the tapas, descriptions of tapas. So the very first one is from before Arjuna goes to Indra, and this is from the 6th sarga. And Arjuna is, it'll take me a moment to find the verses. Yeah, let me just read a few verses. His sole pleasure disciplining the senses. He destroyed, let me read the Sanskrit. Shamayan dhritendriya shamaika sukha shuchibhir gunair aghamayam satamaha prativasaram sukritibhirvavridhe vimalak kalabhiriva shita ruchihi adhari chakara cha viveka gunatan aguneshu tasya dhyam astavataha pratighatiniim vishaya sangaratim nirupaplavaha shamasukhanubhavaha. So it's beautiful, flowing, complex meter. His sole pleasure disciplined the senses, Indriya Shama. He destroyed tamas, dark impurity, with his shuchibhir gunaihi, his shining virtues. Free of blemish, he flourished day by day with acts of tapas, like the cool rayed moon, dispeller of darkness, waxing with its digits. And there are many more descriptions, but here's one that is very beautiful. When the self-controlled Arjuna worshipped Indra, king of the gods, with meditation, manasa, japaihi, sacred chants, pranatibhihi, ritual prostrations, he displayed 2 kinds of splendor. One innate, the other acquired, of martial power, military power on the one hand, and of peace on the other. Sahajetarau jaya shamau dadhati bibharam babhuva yugapat mahasi. 2 kinds of splendor, yugapat, all at once. That is, Arjuna, one thing doesn't prevail, the other thing doesn't prevail. Both shama, the Shanta Rasa, the quietude of the ascetic or the yogi, along with the Vira, with the martial power. He never gives it up, and that is what this shows. It is shown in the language itself. Sahajetarao, inborn and acquired. Jaya Shamau, victory, and Shama, Shanti. Dadhati, the splendor has both of them, but it is in what we know in Sanskrit as the Dvandva compound. The Dvandva compound is just like the Dvandvas or dilemmas or oppositions in life. Sahaja, Itara, the opposite. Jaya, Shama. How can victory, military victory, and Shanti be together? And again, go back to the Bhagavad Gita. You have hundreds of verses in the Gita where the Sukha Dukkhe Same Kritva Labha Labha Jaya Jayo, that is exactly what we are supposed to be thinking of. So there are many more descriptions like this, but let me just read one beautiful one. It wafted a favorable, soft, scented breeze around him. It tempered the sun's hot rays, rendered pleasing to the eye in defiance of the season. It made the tall trees bow with young sprouts as hands cupped in reverence for him to pluck flowers. Every night it strewed soft grass on the earth, turning it into a comfortable bed for him. And it settled the dust, rajas. Rajas also means the guna of rajas, the worldly qualities. Rajasah shamanam. And it settled the dust with raindrops showered from a cloudless sky. In all these ways, tapas itself served the emaciated Arjuna as if moved to compassion for him. This is a beautiful description of how tapas itself served Arjuna. And then Indra comes and challenges him and so on. So let's listen to a little bit of Indra's test of Arjuna very quickly. That this is 11:15, but I will, yes. Prapitsoho kimchate muktim nisprihasya kalevare maheshudhi dhanurbhimam bhutanam anabhidruha. If you are truly a person of detachment, don't worry about that now, seeking liberation with no interest, mukti, in protecting your body and no wish to harm living beings, why do you carry a fierce bow and two great quivers? And if you are indeed the ascetic that you claim to be, I have further verses here. The sword of yours, as terrifying to mortals as the third arm of the god of death, Yama's arm, fails to convince me of your commitment to ahimsa, non-violence, which is the vow, the primary vow of the ascetic. How can you do this when you are... excuse me a moment. I need water. How can you do this when you have vowed ahimsa and you're carrying all these weapons of himsa with you? And again, you can see it in the language itself. I don't know if you can see it. Jayamatra bhavanunam aratishu abhilashukaha krodha lakshma kshamavanta. Again, it's the same juxtaposition. Where is the weapon and where are the angry people and their weapons, and where are the ascetics who want nothing but shanti and shama in the universe, peace in the universe? So then, he has many arguments about why this is such a bad thing to do. For example, he says, conquer the enemies in your body, so difficult to overcome. The senses beginning, the indriyas beginning with the eye. When you have subdued these enemies, then you will have conquered the whole world. Why do you need to go and fight the Kauravas? On this secluded mountain peak, perennially bathed by the river Ganga, Janu's daughter, liberation will come to you very quickly. Put aside your weapons. Edi shantas tapodhana, and be a shanta tapodhana. Excuse me, I'm coughing, so I should drink some water. So, Arjuna's reply, I'll read just a couple of verses from there. It's very beautiful and very simple. He says a lot of things about how a warrior must never give up his warrior dharma. His guru has told him to do this. He has to obey him, his elder brother. So here, I do not crave the pleasures of sense, nor wealth, unsteady as the waves of the ocean. Nor do I seek the sequestered haven of moksha, out of fear of that thunderbolt, the vajra, the transience of human existence. I seek instead to wash away with the tears of our enemies' grieving widows the mud of disgrace that treachery and lies have heaped upon us. And then he says, until I exterminate my enemies and restore the reputation of my family, I shall think of liberation itself as an obstacle to victory. And I'm just reading selections from this very long speech. Self-respecting men, here it is. That man is a blot on his noble family, like the spot, kalanka, on the moon, who fails when hard times come to carry out his master's command. What is more, and he's already talked about Vyasa's teaching and so on. What is more, how can I take up renunciation before its due time? How can I be a sannyasi before I have done my duty? That is not acceptable. A course that would interfere with the code of conduct laid down for me, a kshatriya and a warrior and a grihastha. This is my time to take care of my family. The ancient lawgivers, Manu and others, teach us to take the stages of life in sequence and order, the varna ashramas, dharma, not to violate that sequence. This tremendous yoke has fallen upon my shoulders. My mother is far away. She must give me permission for sannyasa. I can't take sannyasa unless my mother tells me to do so. My brother is my king, my elder brother, and very pious. All these things constrain my freedom to choose moksha. Self-respecting men stand by the code of conduct appropriate for them. Swadharmam anurundhante na atikramam aratibhihi palayante kritadvamsaha na ahavat manashalinaha. Even when crushed by the enemy, they do not flee from battle. And then he says, Vichinnabhra vilayam va viliye nagamurdhani Aradhyava sahasraksham ayashah shalyam uddhare. I shall either propitiate Indra and pluck out the thorn of dishonor from my family, or perish upon this mountain peak like a shattered cloud. That verse, that word, Vichinna Abra Vilayam, is an actual reference to the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna himself says, will I perish like a Chinnabhra, a cloud that has been pierced and broken. So that is my discussion of that. Then the next thing is the tapas, in which he is extremely brilliant and overpowering the universe. I'm not going to read more than 2 verses, and then I will end with the final bit of Shiva's revelation and how Bhairavi's is a unique revelation. So this is the description. There's much here, but I'm not going to read all of them. Arjuna the conqueror appeared taller than a mountain. He excelled the ocean's depths in tranquility and shone brighter than a blazing fire at midnight. Encircled by the light flashing from his teeth as he constantly chanted secret mantras, his face shone like the sun's orb, surrounded by a fierce halo. Wearing a suit of armor, his strung bow serving as the warrior's sacred thread, he shone like Himalaya, lord of mountains, its perilous forests wreathed by a rainbow. When the emaciated ascetic walked to the river for his niyama savana, his ritual bath, the Himalaya seemed to sink to the earth, crushed by his steps. Virtue, not physical bulk, lends substance to a man's character. At night, as Arjuna stood with arms raised, a blinding light rose above his head, spread over space, and blocked the celestial paths of the gods and sages. And earlier, he has, his heart, the very first verses, his heart set on victory over the Pandavas' enemies. Pure of mind and body, Arjuna fasted for many days, standing with one leg planted on the ground, face turned toward the sun. This is the famous Ekapada tapas and looking at the sun. And then, of course, Shiva comes and all of these things. But now we go to the very end of the poem so that I can wrap up my argument. There's a beautiful description of Arjuna Throughout the poem, Arjuna is shown as combining these two qualities, Veera and Shanta. That is the key to Bharavi's very dramatic presentation of it. And he starts with this description. His endeavor about to bear auspicious fruit. The auspicious fruit is the revelation of Shiva and the boon. The sage in the purifying hermitage of battle observed his vow of heroic combat, mortifying himself with Shiva's arrows instead of mantras and fasting. Remember those images of the arrows piercing him like, a porcupine? Upodha kalyana phalobhirakshan veeravratam punyaranashramastha japopavasairiva samyatatma tepe munistair ishubhih shivasya. So a longer meter in this description. There are many more things here, and he's even takes the Vedanta metaphor of the sun. As the sun shines with the brilliance of 1,000 rays, both in his own realm, Nije Vartmani, and in his reflected image in the water, which is a very important Vedanta simile, to Shiva's army, the swiftly moving hero appeared to have two distinct forms, one in the sky and another in the battlefield. A single hero fighting an entire army of hunters and Shiva himself. Severed from its hilt by an arrow shot by Shiva, his bright sword rolled from his hand like a fiery bolt of lightning from a cloud bank. Deprived of bow and arrows and armor, his fine sword broken, defeated in combat, he stood clean and bare. Defeated by Shiva, yet determined to conquer him, then he starts throwing he picks up all the trees and started throwing them at Shiva. Then finally Shiva just poo-poos everything, and then Shiva forgives him, but still wants to keep fighting. And then the ascetic began to fight with his formidable arms as his own ordinary arms as his only weapon, attacking Shiva with the fury of a mighty fighting elephant. At once, Shiva threw aside his own bow and quivers and struck back at him with fists like hammers. There are many more descriptions here in the 18 verses, but here's what I'll say. Enraged by defeat, he lunged forward with tremendous force, and seizing the moon-crested god's arms with his own, he forced them wide apart and held them down. Then those expert warriors, proud of having no weapons but their mighty arms, their limbs locked together in tricky wrestling grips, began a bout of fighting that shook the mountain. More description. When the wrestlers released their grip around each other's limbs and leaped gracefully about, you know how they circle each other, gracefully about each other, loudly striking their arms, the rivers, their banks depressed by the wrestlers' steps. These are great wrestlers, right? Shiva himself and the great hero Arjuna. They began to overflow on the mountain. Then Shiva, destroyer of the demons' 3 cities, Tripurari, took a flying leap into the sky, and Arjuna, warrior with the Kapi banner, the monkey or Hanuman banner, shot up after him, depressing the earth with his feet, and seized the god's feet in mid-air. So you must imagine this happening in mid-air. Both of them are flying and Arjuna is holding. Astonished by the deed, I'll read the Sanskrit. Vismitas sapaditena karmana, karmanam kshayakara parah puman, ksheptu kamam avanautam aklamam, nishpipesha parirabhya vakshasa. Astonished by that deed, the Supreme Person, Paramah Puman, the ender of men's deeds, at once gathered into his arms the peerless hero, who was about to throw him onto the ground and pressed him to his chest in a tight embrace. Arjuna doesn't become a ball of flesh or faint or anything like that. He is actually embraced by the god. And here is the crux line. The Lord was even more pleased by his boundless courage than by his tapas. To a man of right conduct, how much more valuable is inborn courage than a host of acquired virtues? And then, of course, Shiva, he recognizes Shiva and then he's given the weapon. It all happens very quickly. Last 2 or 3 comments will be on the ending. And I think I've already shown you enough visual images of the ending. In some of those images, you saw that you would have seen, if you could look very carefully at the image, that there is a woman standing on the side and there's a tree which shows very prominently. In Karnataka and in Lepakshi and other places, there is a very common folk story, and in some versions of the Mahabharata also, that Shiva didn't come alone, and the Mahabharata itself says he came with his Kirati, his huntress wife, and she's dressed in leaves and she's wearing a hat and, you know, feathers and things like that. Now, what's interesting is that this Kirati wife in the folk story takes an even greater importance. Folk stories are like that. She says to Shiva, prove to me this guy is a hero. I don't believe you. You know, this is not good enough. Then how can I prove it? If he does not ever show his back to you, then he's a true hero. But he has a mole on the back of his neck, and I have to see that mole without his turning his back to you, because turning back means you're a coward, right? So I want to pose this challenge to you, Shiva. I, Parvati, want to see this. So Shiva somehow very carefully manages, and the way he does it is that he lets Arjuna take the upper position. You saw the Arjuna sitting on top of Shiva, and he's throttling the god, and he almost chokes into, if he were to die, he would die, right? Any man would have died. Shiva won't die. But he's throttling the god. And as he's throttling him, Parvati says, enough, enough, I see the mole. Enough, enough, don't throttle my husband, and so on. And then Shiva then reveals himself. So here, the hero is showing the upper hand, right? He's not the devotee who, you know, kowtows to Shiva, but he says that till the end, the folk hero will not give up and he will just do this. In the other ones, the Mahabharata ones, you know, he becomes this kind of devotee and he makes a linga and worships. But Bharavi, I think, has this perfect balance. And the balance is that the hero, without realizing and without getting out of his role and character, is doing what is right without threatening the god. He doesn't know it's a god, of course. And then when the god shows himself, he embraces him as an equal. He doesn't mangle him or make him grovel or anything like that, and tells the hero how pleased he is. And then Arjuna does a beautiful stotra of, I think it's 18 or 19 verses in all the meters in the Sanskrit language. And the final verses are so simple. There's almost no description whatsoever. This is the last verse I will read. And yeah, the very beautiful long verses are all over. And then in the very end of the poem, the gods in chorus praised Arjuna, victor with indomitable energy, who had risen to prominence with his power and stood bearing a heavy yoke for the preservation of the world, towering over all the worlds, once again, with the innate courage of a warrior and blazing with the fire of tapas, the combination, right? But he's also this bhakta. When Shiva said, go forth and conquer your enemies, I'll read the Sanskrit. Vraja jaya ripulokam pada padmanatah san, gadita iti shivena shlaghito deva sanghai, nijagraham athagatva sadaram panduputro, dhrita guru jaya lakshmir dharmasonum nanama. Very simple. When Shiva said, go forth and conquer your enemies, Pandu's son bowed at the Lord's lotus feet. Then praised by the hosts of gods, all of them are surrounding him, and bearing the supreme majesty of victory. It goes without saying he's carrying, the Pashupata is not just a weapon that he's holding in his hand. He has internalized it. The mantra of the Pashupata goes from Shiva to, and all the gods to him, and he has internalized it, and that shining glory is with him. And bearing the supreme majesty of victory, he returned home and bowed to Dharma's son. That is how the poem ends, and I end my talk with that image. Thank you very much. Please tell me what to do next, and I will do that. I'll drink the water. we should take questions. I don't know how much time there's left, but there's at least 10 minutes left. So I finished within time, didn't I? Good. Okay. All right. So questions first. Thank you, Swamiji. Yes, please. Yeah, take a mic so that everyone can hear. Thank you. And if anyone wants to look at the book, it's here. I can pass it around. Can someone come and pick it up? Yeah, you can circulate it. Yeah, give the booklet and the speech. Yes, this is the time. Yeah, and some people might like to see the physical copy. Sure, yeah, just to look at, right? Yes, question, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Shobana.
To me, Bhagavad Gita has been the essence of Mahabharata.
Yes.
So, yes, I did not get deep into understanding his process of attaining the Pashupata Astra.
Yeah.
But when it comes to how the Nayanmars looked at the, even they have spoken at great about
Yes.
the relationship of Arjuna and Shiva. So, why do we classify the Tevarams as only bhakti and not philosophical also? Because there is so much of depth and so much of knowledge that is imbibed within the Tevarams.
Yes, yes.
So-
I don't think anyone classifies them as not philosophical. Entire books have been written about the philosophy. Deep Shaiva Siddhanta, pre-Shaiva Siddhanta philosophy is contained. Without that, there would have been no bhakti. And so, yes, it's perfectly...
But, I mean, the generalization of it under bhakti movement
right.
kind of
Marginalizes it.
dilutes the depth of information that is there
True.
in the Tevarams.
That is from the outsider's perspective. Those who practice the religion from the inside of the Tamil Shaiva Siddhanta, for them, this is the sacred canon, the Tevaram hymns. That's why I translated them. And they contain the essence of the Vedas, the Agamas, according to them, and in very subtle ways that the three poets, Appar, Sundarar, and Sambandar, and later, and also, of course, the other poets such as Tirumular and Manika Vasakar, all of these people have embodied philosophy in their poems. There's no question. And as I said, commentaries, much has been written about the philosophy, and not just from the Shaiva Siddhanta texts, but also on the Tevaram, and definitely it's a very beautiful thing. Thank you for raising that point. Yes. And one point I wanted to make was that Bharavi was described as Mahashaiva. And as I said, Shaivism is spreading, so he wanted to include bhakti in a rather sterile, in the rather sterile atmosphere of the Kavya court. And he included the Shiva episode because it both resonated with his own personal religion, but also with this, what you call the philosophy. Thank you so much, Shobana. Any other questions? Oh, right, please. Yeah, so what's the question? Zoom, yes. I don't know much about how to do that, so let me know. So don't, why do we have this blank screen now? Yes, meanwhile, yes. And then we'll get back to Zoom. Yeah. Well, please give her a mic. Somebody should walk over and give her a mic so the Zoom people can hear it. Oh, you can walk.
This is from a person who's been teaching Kirata Juniam.
Speak, please. Yeah, louder.
Check.
Yeah,
So
okay.
she's been teaching Kirata Juniam for a bunch of people.
Yes.
And she's used your text. She's very grateful.
Wonderful.
She says,
Wonderful.
please ask this question on my behalf to Professor. Thank you
Yes.
for a wonderful talk. What are the places Bharavi has deviated from the Mahabharata storyline apart from adding Apsaras?
As I said, making the descriptions of Arjuna's tapas so focal, making Arjuna's persona of having himself, showing himself as simultaneously embodying Veera and Shanta, which is an impossible combination, the dvandvas, the oppositions. It's a paradox. He sets it up as a conundrum, and I have in my book and also in what I've given you discussed why this was a conundrum. Already in Manu and others, tapas is seen as a way of getting or acquiring ordinary goals, right? So it's not a big problem for people to perform tapas in order to get victory or something like that. So why does Bharavi make it into such a big issue? One suggestion is that the temple religion around Shiva and Vishnu in the South Indian region came about in steep and stark opposition to Buddhist and Jain movements, or rather the presence of Buddhists and Jains. And unfortunately in the Tevaram, there is the vilification of the Jains and Buddhists is in the 10th, in the last verse of every one of Sambandhar's hymns. And Appar himself was a Jain who converted back to Shaivism, rather he was a Shaiva who converted to Jainism, then he converted, and it is said that he converted Mahendravarman Pallava to Shaivism. So there is a lot of political and religious tension in South India at this time, and the Bhakti movement wasn't just a simple movement, if you want to call it a movement. The saints were singing against other people. The famous examples or notorious examples of Madurai, where the Chola queen, Mangayar Karashi, Valavar Kaun Pavai, Vari Valaikai Madamani. Angayar Kanni, you know, she invites Sambandar to come to Madurai and argue with the Jains in philosophy. That's it. The Jains said in Prakrit, Atti Nati. It's either there or it exists or it doesn't exist. This is deep philosophy, right? And so Sambandar then fights with them with manuscripts which he throws in the river, which don't get burned by fire. And the very unfortunate ending of that is that either the Jains are said to have impaled themselves or Shiva got them impaled or whatever. This is not a very pleasant episode. But the point is that the Buddhists and Jains were rivals to these, to Shaiva religion at that time, and it comes very much to the fore in the poetry itself. You asked me to sing a Tevaram. I'll sing the very first one, Sambandar. Todudaya seviyan vidayerivo tuvenmadi sudi. Todudaya seviyan vidayerivo tuvenmadi sudi. Kadudaya sudalai podi posiyan ullo kavakal Yedudaya malaran munanal pani detavarul seida Pidudaya pirama puramevia pemmanivanan I'm sorry, I've lost my voice. I'm just trying. This is in the raga Nattapade, which is equivalent to Natte, and it's an auspicious beginning raga. And this is Sambandar's first poem, where he says he wears a woman's earring on one ear and a man's on the other. And he showed himself to me with the lady with whom he shares himself. And then Brahma came to this place, his birthplace, Shirgari, where he blessed, he himself performed penance in order to see Shiva. I am blessed here by him. He is the thief who stole my heart. Ullankavar Kalvan. That is the famous first Devaram. So that's one thing that I could. Today is Tiruvadirai, the day sacred to Shiva, and most temples there will be performance of Devaram, which I studied many years ago, 1976 to 79, 80. I was in all these temples studying the Devaram. And you all gave me food and shelter in Chennai when I was working with Oduvars in Chennai. And the Oduvars are the great singers who sing these beautiful hymns in the temples. Okay, so one other question? I hope I answered the person who asked from Zoom. Arjuna's, I mean, so the dramatic nature of the conundrum that Bharavi sets up, which isn't really that important for many people, but in this poem it becomes important because of the tension between how tapas is perceived in Buddhism and Jainism and how it is perceived in Hinduism, and how all of these things were changing in the 7th century when the bhakti becomes very prominent in that region. That's my understanding of it. So I hope that was good. Maybe we can have one more question and stop after that? And I'll make sure it's short. You need to send the mic, yeah.
I just want to mention that Arjuna's name has come from Arjava. Arjuna's name has come from Arjava, one in thought, word and deed. The name of Arjuna, etymology, comes from Arjava, Sanskrit word Arjava.
I don't know the etymology of Arjuna, so I won't comment on that. Thank you.
No, it's just one in thought, word and deed. One who is one in thought, word and deed is Arjava.
You mean Arjava or something like that? That means rectitude, Arjava, from Riju, if I'm correct. But I didn't understand what you said, so let us talk later about that. Yeah. Sir, there are many Sanskrit scholars here. I'd be honored if you had a comment or question. Yeah, Arjava is straightforward. Rectitude is the Latin term for that.
That's all the meaning of that.
Yeah.
So a person who is straightforward, not having any of those multiplicities and all that,
right,
is called Arjava.
Okay.
Arjava. It's an adjective.
Right, but I don't know the actual etymology, so thank you for giving me that etymology.
Arjuna is because of that name.
Right.
Straightforward.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you for both of you for giving me those etymologies. And all of you can decide when to stop the questions. I can't decide, right? Maybe that's over then. All right. Thank you. And it's 12 o'clock, so good. I'm finished, so we can do whatever you would like to do next. Thank you so much. Yes. I should also say thank you again for being such a patient and friendly audience. I really appreciate it. It was very good for me. They will talk?
Yeah, just very short.
Okay. Give a time limit, like 2 minutes.
I request Professor Srinivasan and Sir C.L. Ramakrishnan sir to please come on to the stage and give a few words of your thoughts, and Professor Ranganathan. Hope you'll, yeah. They'll give their concise thoughts for each of you all. 2 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Just 2 minutes. Professor Srinivasan needs no introduction. He is the former principal of Vivekananda College and also former head of the Department of Sanskrit and a great Sanskrit scholar, and very close to the Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation, and he has been a pillar of support in many of our activities. just a very short introduction about him.
Thank you. One of the very beautiful lectures, and I stand very much enlightened on hearing all these informations. Though I have studied Kirata Arjuniyam, and of course a few sargas have been prescribed regularly. In fact, Bharavi starts that actually the period Simha Vishnu, Mahendra Varman, Narasimha Varman, all those periods from 590 BC AD to it starts. The very first sarga, Sriyah Kurunam Adhipasya Palanim Prajasu Paschat Yamayungta Veditum Sa Varnilingi Viditas Samayayo Yudhishtiram Dvaitavane Vanecharaha. Yudhishthira had sent a spy to Duryodhana's place to know how Duryodhana is running the. In fact, when Drona has arranged the what is called a sport event at the end of the Gurukula, there were more people sided with Kauravas than with Pandavas. So they have to stop the fight in between. In fact, Karna episode also was there. They have to stop it. So the balance is going up and down. The scale is not always balanced, or scale is not always even. Scale is going one side up and one side down and all those things. So Duryodhana wants to know why the scale, how the scale is now when these people have gone to forest. And Duryodhana, Bharavi starts, Duryodhana has shown at least one step up.
He actually says Suyodhana because that's also a very...
That's the present in the first sarga. That is the administration which he presented is very beautiful. He made people forget Pandavas. This is how he starts, Bharavi starts, and then the tussle, as she has presented beautifully, the tussle is religious tussle, but it is not only religious tussle. In fact, if you look at the history and culture of Indian people by Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan, that is called the struggle for empire. That is the three great people, Harsha on the northernmost side, the Chalukya Pulakesi in the central, and Mahendra Varma and Narasimha Varma in the south. All the three people were quarreling each other, and it is a draw. There is no win or defeat or anything like that. In that particular situation, Bharavi beautifully presents his story, and not only that, in fact, later on in Vakrokti Jivita, the author Kuntaka says, why the Kavyas? Kavyas were introduced to teach. Remember, there is no school textbooks, as we have got school textbooks now. The Kavyas were the textbooks for ordinary people and the princes and all those people. He gives in the first paragraph why, what Kavyas teach, etc. And those informations have been beautifully presented by Bharavi, and of course, and all these informations, especially the 11th Sarga, where there is a tussle. In fact, there is an historical anachronism also, because Arjuna's attitude is quite opposite in Bhagavad Gita compared to 11th Sarga. And the last Sarga, where in about 18 or 19 verses, she presented Arjuna is praising Lord Shiva. There the philosophy also is slowly evolving. That the philosophy is not perfect in that context. Okay, all these things were there. And she has given us a beautiful idea about Bharavi's Kirata Arjuniya. And as I said, Sa Vijayatam Ravikirtihi, Kavita Sirta Kalidasa Bha Ravikirtihi, Bharavikirtihi. And in the way, Bharavi his period is 640. Bharavi is nearly 590 or so. Within about 50 years, Bharavi has become so famous throughout India, and his work has been accepted. And that beauty, that fame, the cause of that fame, all those things have been not only brought out, but they have been brought out in such a way that goes into our minds. And thank you, madam, for your nice lecture.
I very much appreciate the comments.
Next, I request Dr. C.L. Ramakrishnan, former Director General of Police, Tamil Nadu. But here more appropriate to introduce him as a great Advaitic scholar and so many other things. And again, very close to Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation. He has taken part in so many of our seminars and all that. We have benefited from him. So over to Dr. Ramakrishna.
Pranams to Sadguru, pranams to Swamiji. My respectful regards to all those who are here. I think Mr. Padmanabhan made serious allegations against me that I am a Sanskrit scholar and all that. I am a very simple Sanskrit student, that's all. I started learning Sanskrit after my retirement. And God's grace and Guru's blessings, I got through with my post-graduation and doctorate in Advaita Vedanta. In Kerala Arjuna also, there are portions speaking about Advaita Vedanta. Today, of course, is more on a literary flow, as very beautifully presented by Madam, and a very usage of certain words. For example, there is one sloga there, Vikashamayur Jagadisha Marganaha, Vikashamayur Jagadisha Marganaha, Vikashamayur Jagadisha Marganaha, Vikashamayur Jagadisha, there is one sloga. All the four padas are having same. But when you split that and get the meaning only, you will understand the depth of the scholarship of the great author. So this is very, today we mentioned about the Vishama and the Viroda. The definition of that itself is Abhasatve Viroda Ched Viroda Abhasa Ishyate. This is the way the definition is given. So all these things are combined today. It's a very scholarly and very educative presentation by Madam. I learned a lot today from this, and I have no words to thank the way in which you have made the preparation. This one paper itself can be given a doctorate. That's why in which it has been done. So it's a great opportunity, and thanks to Swamiji and Sadguru, we are all educated on this subject. It's a very beautiful text. There are 5 texts called Mahakavyas in Sanskrit, 2 by Kalidasa, one is Raghuvamsha, one is Kumar Sambhava, then Maga, Shishupalabhada, and Kirada Juniya of Bharavi, and finally you get Sriharsa's Naishadiya Charita. They are called the 5 Mahakavyas. Kavya itself is Kavehe Karma Kavyam, and Mahakavya, not ordinary, and it's got plenty of meaning for research, study, cogitation, meditation, and all these things. So wonderful presentation. We are all grateful to you, Madam, and thankful for attending all those people who are fortunate to have that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for your very eloquent description of what I did. I really, really appreciate it, sir.
We are very happy that His Excellency, the Honorary Consul General for Myanmar, Professor Ranganathan, has joined us today. And he is a visiting professor for international relations at Vinayaka Missions Research Foundation, which is a private university in Tamil Nadu. And he strives for bringing Myanmar and India together in so many different ways. He has spoken at many of our events of Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation here, so he is not new to us. So we look forward to his comments now.
Pranams to Swamiji, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. I was in Myanmar today morning when I reached Chennai, and Madam Badma said you should come, and then I said, shall I come late, maybe after 11 in the morning? She said, please come. And Swamiji already 10 days back, Swamiji informed about this event, so I feel really fortunate to attend this prestigious lecture by Professor Indira Peterson. Sri Vishnu Mohan Foundation always known for incredible meetings. And this is one such meeting where Swamiji invited Professor Indira Peterson, Mount Holyoke College, USA, for a very, very, beautifully, brilliantly expounded about, Arjuna's penance and the combat with the Shiva. And Madam, went so, depth into it, explaining various, aspects of Arjuna and Shiva. And today being a very, an important day, and this lecture would be, a great, blessing. And it is truly a great lecture, and we are all, I learned personally a lot. And certainly this endowment lecture should, created a positive impact among the devotees of Vishnu Morgan Foundation. Interestingly, I want to appeal to His Holiness that Myanmar next week, His Holiness Sri Ravi Shankar is visiting to bless the people of Myanmar. And I want Swamiji also to visit later, to visit Burma, presently Myanmar, to visit Myanmar and to bless the people of Myanmar. And from our side, we will give all support, and we request, humbly appeal to Swamiji to come and visit Myanmar, the Garden of the East, one of the most beautiful countries in Southeast Asia. And I believe our DGP knows, former DGP knows better about Burma. And we want Swamiji to come, and we need the blessings of all saints from India. So I humbly request Swamiji to visit Myanmar anytime after February, and we will organize it, in a way we will do. So I'm so thankful for this, for Vishnu Morgan Foundation and for Swamiji for giving this opportunity. And I request Professor Indira Peterson to continue this noble work, talking at various places about this, that, Arjuna's penance and combat with the Shiva. And therefore, you're welcome to Myanmar also, ma'am, and we can organize a meeting. I'm very happy you mentioned about Buddha Charita. Buddhism is very popular in Myanmar. It's a Buddhist country, and almost 85% people, I would say, are Buddhist, and we have 9 lakh Tamils in Myanmar. We have 15 lakh Indians, and we have 9 lakh Tamils living in Myanmar, and there are temples everywhere. We have Shiva temple, Vishnu temple, and we have temples everywhere in Yangon, and it is a beautiful city. Most welcome to Myanmar. Today we have a direct flight from Chennai. Every Saturday we have a flight to, from Chennai to Myanmar, and I inaugurated the flight from Chennai airport. Today we have an aircraft from Chennai, and it took 75 years for India to have a, Chennai to have a direct flight, to Yangon. It took 75 years. And today we have a direct flight, and we will be connecting India like Hyderabad, Bangalore, and many other places to Myanmar very soon. So I need the blessings of Swamiji, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I just wanted to say, I wanted to directly thank Swamiji for inviting me. I hadn't done that before, and I really like the interfaith work that your foundation is doing, and visiting other countries and having dialogue. I think there's no world peace without dialogue, and I know you are doing a lot toward that, and that's why I accepted the invitation. And I also wanted to remember our maternal grandfather, Sri S. Venkatramanan, who was like V. Doraiswamy, a civil servant, but he was from Mysore, and he was a very brilliant amateur Sanskrit scholar. Without him, I don't think I would be here today, and I really wanted to remember him. My book, Design and Rhetoric in Bharavi's Kiratarjuniyam, is dedicated to my uncle as well as my gurus in Sanskrit. Not my uncle, to my grandfather as a guru in that other sense, as well as my other gurus. But I'm sure that his blessing was with Sri V. Doraiswamy, which made him such a great intellectual who was open to all kinds of topics and all kinds of dialogues. So I just wanted to say a word of thanks to all of you. And above all, the delight that I have in seeing my Aunt Vijaya, who has actually been able to come. I wanted to thank her for coming.
We'll just take a few moments in honoring our guests. I request Mr. Padmanabhan to hand over the memento to Dr. Indira, Professor Indira, with a shawl.
Oh, to the front, okay. Is there a way?
Yeah, there is a way. I request Mr. Padmanabhan to honor Professor Ranganathan, Honorary Consul to Myanmar, with a shawl and
Thank you for coming so far. Thank you.
now Mr. Padmanabhan will also honor Mr. C.L. Narasimhan. C.L. Ramakrishnan, sorry. And now he will also honor Professor Srinivasan. With a shawl and Vijay. Okay. Now, on behalf of the Doraiswamy Endowment Foundation, Srimati Vijaya Doraiswamy will hand over a memento to Dr. Indira to show her love and affection.
I will go there.
Yes.
She should not have to move at all.
Padma. Padma.
One small announcement. See, Vishnu Mohan Foundation has published the Vishnu Sahasranamam book in Sanskrit, and also it contains some other slokas. If anyone wants it, they can take. It's not priced as such, but any amount is welcome as donation. Otherwise also it can be not a problem. If anyone wants, they can collect it. It's there. Please contact me or please contact Sri Kumar.
Right now, until then they can go for lunch.
Yeah, but
Evening and a program.
speech Apparav gallery
Okay, we come to the end of the program. So, on behalf of Vishnu Mohan Foundation and Sri Peetam, I thank one and all for having taken your precious time to come and listen to such a wonderful lecture. And the presentation was something that was so close to my heart. I need to mention that to her because my research was on Tevaram. So, need a lot to talk to you on that. Lunch is being served, and before we go, there will be another small announcement about the program in the evening by Professor Indira at
Apparav Gallery.
At Apparav Galleries.
Yeah, I'll just this is the this is at time 5 to 6:30.
It is at Apparao Galleries between 5 to 6:30. And the topic will be Raja Sharfoji's Library and the Madras Literary Society. I request one and all to please take your time and come to the program. Thank you.